esteemed Principal of the College, Dr. P. Ravindra Babu, eminent Vice Principal, Academics, Dr. G. Prasad, veteran Vice Principal, Dr. B. Karun Kumar, distinguished Director of the English Language Teaching Center, Dr. P. Ramanujan, the eminent resource person of today's webinar, Dr. Rama Matthew, Venerable Professor Dr. Jacob Tharu, Dr. Leena Mukhopadhyaya, Dr. Vijaya, all the HODs of various technical departments, the coordinators of the webinar, Mr. Rajkumar and Mr. Rajkiran, the moderator, Mr. Shiva, all the colleagues who are involved in this webinar, and the principals and advisors of our sister institutes. A very good morning, everybody. I welcome all the participants as well, the enthusiastic people who are interested to listen to these webinars today, to the third day's presentation, and the third day's webinar are conducted by Dr. Rama Matthew today. As you know, today the topic of the webinar is how do we keep learning and growing as teachers. And so I now request Dr. Rama Matthew to hold the session. May I now invite Dr. Rama Matthew. Ma'am, could you please conduct the session?
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot. Before I begin, can you all hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Before I begin, I would like to again thank your college, Vijay Lakshmi, and especially you for taking this initiative to set up this 4-day webinar. I'm sure some of it, if not all of it, will be very useful and relevant to everyone. So I would be very interested to know how useful it was to the participants at the end of the 4-day session actually. So today's topic is, let me show you my PowerPoint. So this is what it is. Can you all see my screen?
Yes, madam.
Okay, thank you. So this is the topic today. How do we keep learning and growing as teachers? Yeah, why I chose this topic was because I firmly believe that we as teachers have to keep ourselves motivated and sustained in the profession. It's very crucial for our mental health and for the mental health of our students and the mental health of our institution, and for the whole profession for the profession as a whole. So I hope I'll be making some kind of useful statement about how we can do this even as we are continuing to do our teaching and learning. So I have, to start with, I've got two scenarios described here. There is a teacher A and there's a teacher B. These are two accounts that we have got from them. This is something like a small diary that they have written, an excerpt from a diary if you like. So there is a teacher A and a teacher B. Could you please read this? Try and see if you can identify yourself in one or both of them, or a little bit of one and a little bit of the other, or what is it? Will take, say, half a minute to read this. If you want me to read it, I can. Do you think I should read it? Rajkumar, is it a good idea to read? Is it possible that some people can't see the slide?
Madam,
yeah.
Do you want us to read the slide, madam, or because
no,
participants cannot?
Participants
yeah, okay.
Cannot read. You mean can they see the slide?
Yeah, they can see the slide, madam.
Okay.
They can.
Okay. Please read the excerpts given by teacher A and teacher B.
Yeah. Madam, on your screen, do you find a small box in the corner?
Yeah.
Teams application.
Yeah,
Would you
yeah.
please minimize that?
Would I please what?
Minimize it. Yeah.
It's minimized.
Minimize in the sense it goes to the toolbar if you minimize it.
Oh, okay. Is that okay? I've minimized it.
Okay, okay, madam. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's.
Okay. So if you have managed to read this quickly, there is this teacher A and teacher B. Now let's see what we can say about these teachers. What is the kind of comment or analysis, if you like, that we can make on these two teachers? Our analysis. Now, which teacher appears motivated? Is it possible for you to write your responses to this? I'll just reduce the screen a bit. Which teacher appears motivated? Can you put that in your question answer box quickly? I can't do that, I think. How do I do this? Just a minute. I'm looking to see if I can. Okay, you are not able to put that into the question answer box, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, madam. Actually, when you pose a question, it takes half a minute or so for the participants to get the access to that.
Okay, okay, we just do without it. So the which teacher appears motivated? It's quite a bit obvious. Teacher B is more motivated because she or he. I normally use the word she for the teacher. I hope the men teachers here don't mind that. She seems to be quite interested in what's happening around her in the college, with her in the class, whatever. So, but then what is the problem teacher A is going through? Teacher A is having quite a few issues, I think. She seems to be a little disheartened, a little maybe frustrated. And in the professional terminology, we say seems to be something like a burnout in that teacher. Burnout is something like stagnation and a kind of overextending, because if you see this teacher, I can't teach this class one more time. Nothing seems to work. She's so fed up. There are far too many things that are beyond my control. So it looks like she has lost control of her work, herself, and she seems so helpless. Why are the students so unruly? Why does the principal ask me to do more and more work? So she's overstretched, as though there's no one else. I have reached a point where I can't spend an iota of energy, time, or attention. What's the way out? So this, we say, is in this professional terminology, burnout or overextending. What about teacher B? What kind of environment is teacher B in? It's quite a pleasant, collaborative, facilitative one. Maybe in your question and answer box, you can add more things that come to your mind about teacher B and teacher A. So here, of course, I'm presenting two scenarios, which is almost like two extremes. One teacher is totally fed up, she's got into a rut, and she's very often, we also, to different degrees, get into this feeling of very routine, mundane thing that's happening over and over again, and we don't see any meaning with it. This happens to almost all of us. And this also, the second teacher's situation is also true on many occasions for many of us. But then the question is, for us to be motivated in our profession, for us to like what we are doing, for us to be doing it with passion, we need to be more like teacher B most of the time. It can't be that sometimes I'm like teacher B, but mostly I'm like teacher A. Then we need to move from A to B if possible. So now today's discussion is all about how we can create an environment that teacher B is in, that kind of environment, not the same thing. That's just one small example, but then how do we do that? There is another task here. We, as teachers, keep ourselves motivated in our profession to avoid boredom or burnout. Think carefully of what you do. Write one way you do this. So I'm again giving you 1 minute. I don't know if you can do this in the question answer box. I planned to see the question answer box, but then that doesn't seem to be possible here. So you need to either think about at least one way you do to keep yourself inspired in the profession. And I'm going to give you my list. What do I do? So think about it carefully for just 1 minute. So about 30 seconds. You can continue to think and write, but in the meantime, I'm going to show mine. It's mine in the sense it's just a list of possible ways in which one can keep oneself motivated in this profession, teaching profession. I can attend workshops or webinars like today. This is one way I think we will come to know other things, we'll come to know, get to know ideas that we can probably go and think about or implement and so on. It's quite a trigger for us to do more things. We could also read articles in the newspapers on education, on professional matters, or articles in academic journals that discuss different aspects of education. Maybe participate and present papers in seminars and conferences, which are now these days have been reduced to webinars and online things. Be a member of a teacher support group. There are many small and big associations, and you can create your own teacher support group in your own college if you like, or in your locality, or in your district. It could be geographically located, or it could be, since it's all online these days, you can have a group which can cover almost the entire country if you like. And another thing that you can very easily do is have a colleague friend. That is not just a colleague, not just a personal friend somewhere else, but a colleague who is a friend. And it's best done in your own workplace, with whom you can talk about your teaching, other issues related to teaching and learning, class, students, everything. This acts as a very cathartic kind of way when you can, when the ideas get triggered, or you can feel that you have someone to share your personal feelings with, all about your work. You could also observe and discuss each other's classes in a non-judgmental way. That is, you agree to sit in on somebody's class, and that other person comes and sits in on your class, and you can talk about it in a critical but a friendly way. So it takes some effort, some training, some practice, but then it's possible, which you can just sit down and, because you know this is a friend who is not going to evaluate you or judge you, but who might give you some suggestions if you ask for it, if you want it. Otherwise, just having somebody there also might help. Then the other thing that you can do is carry out classroom-based research. There are many others. I'm sure you have put down something which will add to this list, which we can't see now. But then let's see how to go about it now. I won't be able to discuss each of these, not that they all need so much discussion at the moment, but then what we are going to focus on is one thing which is a focus of today's, is classroom research. I want to focus on how to do classroom research in our own simple, small way, in our own classroom, and then see how what the different aspects of it are. So we are going to look at why do classroom-based research, and why there are types of teacher research. There is how do we do classroom-based research? How do we ask research questions? Data gathering tools, other considerations, planning, ethics, challenges, etc. And how do we start? So this is what we are going to do today. Just spend some time on that. I hope this interests you. I can tell you, I can say it with a lot of confidence and conviction that I have done quite a lot of this myself. I have been in teacher research groups, and it's a fantastic way of keeping yourself alive. So let's look at something. Now, the basic terminology I want to clarify, which is about teacher research and academic research. We are not talking about academic research here in this presentation. We are talking about teacher research, which is research by teachers and for teachers. I conduct research into something that's useful for me. I conduct research in my own classroom and context. I choose whether I want to share it, and if so, how. When you do research, you want to talk about it, you want to disseminate it, you want to share the excitement, so you can think of that. You can even present it in a seminar or a webinar, and then there'll be lots of people who will want to know more about it, or you can form teacher groups that way, and it's like a snowball thing. It can become bigger and bigger. Academic research, we all know, many of you have these qualifications, MA, MPhil, PhD, whatever. You do research as part of this, definitely as part of MPhil and PhD. Many MAs have small dissertations, and you can also disseminate it in the form of producing a book or writing papers on it or presenting it at a seminar, whatever. But then this is called academic research, when you are doing it for a qualification. It may involve teachers as research students or participants, but it's usually supervised by an academic. You would invariably have a supervisor for your PhD or MPhil. It may or may not be directly useful to the classroom. We are talking about ELT research. We would like any ELT research, even if it is academic research, to be relevant to classrooms, but then there can be research which is very indirectly relevant, but that will still qualify as academic research. But in teacher research case, it emanates from the classroom and feeds back into the classroom. That's why it's called classroom-based research. Other terms that are used for teacher research is also practitioner research, action research, and so on. Okay, so what are the benefits of teacher research? Why should I do it if I'm not getting an MA, MPhil, or PhD? Findings are directly relevant to the teacher. When you do this, remember you have got some kind of an issue or a puzzle which you want to research into, and you find some kind of a solution or a kind of a deeper understanding of that, and then it feeds back. That's why it's very relevant. Teacher-student empowerment. Because it's done in the classroom, students are an integral part of this. They'll also be involved, 100%. So both people, both you and the teacher, both you and the student will start thinking about it, learning from it, and become more and more deeply involved in it. And there is improved reflection and analytical skills, not only for this research, your classroom research, but which you can use in future. Leads to research publications, presentations. I'll show you at the end how many publications there are based on teacher research, and how teachers, in fact, all over the world, in fact, have come together to share their research and to talk about it and get motivated by that. You can also be a preparation for higher qualification. If you have not done your MPhil or PhD, you could begin with classroom research and then see how problems or issues emerge from there. Then you can extend it or develop it into a bigger study if you like. So that's also a possibility. Usually classroom research is a sort of small scale kind of research. which won't involve the same amount of work and effort and time as academic research, usually. When we adopt a research approach to teaching, we carefully observe what we and our students actually do, not just go by what we think we do. Yesterday, we were talking about evidence. So this research is all about evidence, and so is evaluation, you know. Evaluation and research are so closely linked. You can't evaluate unless you have some evidence. Similarly, research is all about looking for evidence so that you know what has gone right, what has gone wrong, or what might want to do. So it involves very close observation and actually looking at what students and what you are doing, not just think of what might be happening. We get feedback, evidence as to the success or failure of what we are doing. And then we customize our teaching to our learners' needs and their settings. When I mentioned this point, I'm reminded of what I said yesterday, like teaching adjustment. It's almost like that. But then when we were talking about formative assessment, which is a very, very small concept in the sense it's very narrow in focus. But here it could be a largish problem, which will span more maybe 6 months, maybe 8 months, and so on. But it's very similar to what we talked about yesterday. We keep learning from our experience and feed it back to our teaching. So this learning I should have highlighted. It's very important that we keep learning. It's like what I was saying in the title of today's presentation. We want to keep learning and growing. So this enables that. Yeah, you might think that we as teachers, normally, we are doing this anyway. So how does it become research? I make a very small distinction between doing research systematically, a small study, as we call it, a small research study, and being research-minded or taking a research approach to teaching. There isn't that much of a difference. When you take a research approach, you do all this, and these are all the benefits. But when you set up a study, then you do some more things. We'll see how we want to do that. I'm talking about not just being research-minded, but adopting a setting up a research study. We also make our students more aware of their role as learners. Now, students become more and more aware, more and more autonomous, more and more self-reliant, and also take responsibility for their learning. And so it's a kind of a two-way process. Teachers help learners to learn, and learners help teachers to learn and teach. So it's a very integrated kind of thing, that more than what is normally happening in your life. So types of research. Now I want to just go a little into not too much theory or anything like that. But there is one type of research called exploratory action research. You may be familiar with this word, action research. It's used very commonly. But here I'm trying to make a small distinction between exploratory action research and action research. So EAR, this begins with exploration of an area of interest or concern, and the teacher carries out research to understand this area of interest, and it stops with a deeper understanding of it. We are not doing anything else. So suppose just to give an example, suppose I feel that some students are really not learning anything from my class, nor paying attention, so I'm really genuinely concerned that these students are not getting anything out of my class. So now so it begins with that interest or concern. Then what I want to do is I carry out a small exploration to understand it better. How do I explore? I try to actually ask them what is troubling them, or why are they not participating, or I think they are not participating. Do they also feel they are not? Why are they sort of disinterested? They don't do the tasks I give them, or they don't come to class, or they come late and distract and so on. So I try to get their perspective. I could also ask a colleague of mine who teaches the same class whether these students behave the same way in her class. She might say, no, not at all. These students are, quite okay, and I won't call them people who are not interested or not learning. Now that is a new perspective which you did not expect. You probably think, now can that be my class was so, not doing the right kind of thing. So you will get a second perspective. You can get a third perspective, but then all this goes deeper. You can in fact observe them very carefully over a week and see if this is happening. Then you will get a deeper understanding. These students should be saying something like, what you do, we just understand, or we come late, we come late because of these reasons, and when we come late, already half the class is over, then reach and so they are a bit. So you could do an observation to find out. This whole thing stops with this understanding. You know that there is a problem. Students feel this. Another colleague, an outsider perspective has, but then you reflect on it. You have had it. So exploratory reaction research institute. The other one is where you take action. You have come to know that your tasks are probably reached at a much higher level than you can manage, and therefore you want to make some change, make some kind of change. Then she plans this change, carries it out, examines it. Then it's a study into an information. So you have actually brought about change because.
Excuse me, madam. Excuse me, madam.
Yes.
There is a slight disturbance with your voice, ma'am.
What do I do?
Would you just keep the microphone close, ma'am, so that we would be able to get your voice clearly?
Okay.
Okay. Now it's okay.
Is it okay?
Yeah,
Now?
it's okay. Now it's okay, ma'am.
Okay.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you. Thanks for that. So now you see, I'm just taking Raj Kumar's example of how he intervened in my talk, because what he found was an issue, which was my voice was not clear. And then he probably knew that everybody is not able to hear. And therefore he had to tell me that I should do something, and the problem is hopefully taken care of. It's not as simple as this action research, but then it gives a good example of that. I want to show you this diagram where I begin like this. This is my first concern. My students seem to be not motivated. It's a very common issue, right? My students seem to be, when I say not motivated, that itself is a bit loaded. It can mean different things to different people, but then they don't seem enough interested to learn is what I mean. Then I plan ways to collect data about this issue. Data as in, what do I mean by motivation? What do they feel? What somebody else feels, and so on. I ask my students their perceptions. I ask a colleague to observe my class. So this is how I'm collecting data for this problem of motivation. I analyze the results and make conclusions. My students want more speaking activities in class. So they are not motivated because I'm probably most of the time talking or reading from the textbook or making them write, but then there aren't many speaking activities. So very clearly this has come up as a possible intervention. Then what do I do next? I plan and design an action plan. So this spiral is going down like this. I plan and design an action plan. Then again, I introduce some games which involve students in those activities. Then I ask my students again for data. Did they see a difference? Do they now feel much better, more interested? I ask a colleague to do that. And then I reflect on it. I analyze the results and make conclusions. My students are more engaged, but in some groups more than others. So there is a small issue that has come up when I probably made groups or when I observe them in groups. I could see that some students are better engaged than others in when I set up this speaking activity. So this one again can go in a spiral. It can keep going down like this in spirals. So this is a cyclical process. It keeps going on. So you might ask, when should I stop? You can stop whenever you want to, whenever you have had some kind of an answer to your problem and things seem better. There is no hard and fast rule about how many circles of work you need to do. But notice that this is the part of exploratory research and this is the part of action research. I want to show this to you in a different diagram. You can see this is shown as steps. Same thing. This part is exploration, where you plan, then explore, then analyze and reflect. And then you plan to change. This is action part. Then you act, then observe and reflect, and it keeps going on. This is to show that it's a continuing process. So here is exploratory action research, and here is action research. And this action, the action is optional and always preceded by exploration. So you can see that when you say you are doing action research, it actually means that you have done the exploration bit. Don't jump to some conclusion. The moment the students are not motivated, don't go and say, now I'll do speaking activities and then I hope you will get motivated. You don't know what that lack of motivation is due to, which you'll need to explore at this stage. Only then will you be ready to implement something. So it's always preceded by exploration. Whereas you can stop your research even with exploration if you have had no time, or if all that you wanted was a deeper understanding of your problem, you can stop here. All right. What are the key stages in this whole thing? You identify an issue, as we said, motivation or lack of participation. Then you design a research study to explore it, and you carry out the study. Then evaluate, reflect on the study and gaining insights. Then modifying practice, take action as a consequence, sharing with others. It's exactly what I said, when I just was explaining the figure. So now we go on to how do we do classroom-based research? As I said, we start with an issue or a concern or a problem that's on our mind. Something is bothering me, something doesn't seem right, or I want to do better. It could even be that there is some success, and even then you want to go deeper, probe further into it. That's also possible. So I actually would have liked some examples from your context. What are the kinds of problems that you all have? Very often you say large classes is a problem. I just don't know how to handle large classes. I want to pay individual attention, but I just can't. And concerns like that. We are very familiar with many of the concerns, but you may have some very specific kinds of issues that you want to study further. So here I'm sorry that we won't be able to get your response to this. It's crucial at this point to problematize taken for granted assumptions. What do I mean by this? Now, for example, students from rural areas or poor backgrounds aren't motivated. We generally have these kinds of fixed notions in our heads. It may be true, you may have experienced it again and again and again, but to generalize this kind of a thing that students from rural areas are not motivated, or they are usually silent. Those who are usually silent in class don't have adequate speaking skills. These are all things that you really need to now problematize, as in ask questions about. These are taken for granted assumptions. Many people say government school children, can't study as well as private school children. Now, this is just a taken for granted thing, and we need to question it. We need to stand it on its head, as it. So research begins with questioning all the assumptions, and you can actually do a very systematic questioning of what do I mean by students from rural areas? What are these rural areas? Where are they? And what are their characteristics? So you have to start deconstructing these questions in order to move further. We need to develop this initial concerns into research, initial concern into actual research questions. the question that you started here, you need to develop this into research questions. But this one you need to keep in mind. It's very, very crucial, very important. I just want, I don't have to show this again. Now this one, how do we ask questions on or about a classroom-based issue? Because all of us have concerns, puzzles, something that has not worked or something that's vaguely troubling me in my head, but then we need to turn them into a research question. How do we do that? I would like to give the example of Socratic questions here. I don't know if I'm sure you know Socrates. Socrates was famous for asking lots and lots of questions. In fact, he went to the extent of saying, if we haven't learned to ask questions in our lives, our life is not worth living. You know, that's an extreme kind of a position he took, but I agree with him, because if we take everything as given, then we can't be researchers, of course, we can't even be good teachers. I'm trying to say that unless you're research minded, unless you can ask all these questions of every phenomenon that you have in your class, in your teaching profession, you need to ask questions and do something about it. Even as you ask questions, things will become clearer. That's what I'm trying to say. When you start reflecting, new dimensions start emerging. So you need to ask these questions. And very often it's very good to have a colleague to talk to with these questions. Suppose you tell your colleague, I would have liked to do a kind of a dialogue here, in pairs, where a colleague has an issue, and then you will ask questions like this. Can you say more about it? Suppose your colleague comes and says, oh my God, I don't know how to do group work, or I don't know how to get these people to do summarizing tasks. Then you say, can you say more about it? What do you think is the main issue? Not that you have to go in this order, these questions, but then these are all possibilities of asking why, what, how questions. Why is that happening? So when you ask these questions, you will be made to think about why, what, and so you will get a better picture of the whole thing. What evidence do you have for this? Could there be other reasons? What other information do we need to know? Is there any possibility that this is not the main reason? You seem to be assuming so and so. Is that true? Is there anything else we can assume instead? What would happen if you did, suppose summarizing? Suppose you didn't give a summarizing task at all at this point. Suppose what would happen if you delayed, and so on. What's an alternative way of doing it? Looking at it. What could another person say about this? These are just examples. You can, in fact, Google Socratic questions, and you will get a much more detailed kind of taxonomy. And you can actually practice asking these questions, and especially with a colleague friend, your colleague, and it lead to very, very good results. Okay, I want to emphasize the importance of reflection. To be an effective reflective practitioner, you must recognize that learning from what doesn't work is as important as learning from what does work. There must be room for failure in the reflective process. Between reflection and doing research, there is a lot of commonality. When you are reflective, you're also thinking back about why something happened, why did I do this, or could I have done it differently, never will I. So all this will go on in your mind, and you're most likely to work on it in a positive and a constructive way when you reflect. But then don't think there is, if you have made a mistake, there is no chance for you to succeed or go ahead. There is as much scope for working on failure in quotation marks, as much as on reflect on success. Unless we make conscious and systematic efforts to critique our own practice, this is another thing about reflection and leading on to research. We'll be unaware of how and when we are being discriminatory. We'll not make use of the knowledge base developed by our own profession. We'll continue to repeat the same mistake. Our skills will stagnate rather than develop. So what you need to do in order for this to not happen is to be make a conscious and systematic effort to critique your own practice. Self-critique is very good. You don't need another person. You can look at it as though you're another person. You become the second person and start looking at it afresh. Nothing like having a colleague who will help you to look at this and then keep encouraging you. She'll keep encouraging you to look at it positively and learn from the mistakes. So this is a part of doing research. This person who is quite a well-known person for action research says that to reflect effectively on your experience, you should actively set aside part of your working day to reflect and analyze. So experiential learning is all about, reflecting on your work and then taking some action on that. Now discussions, again, I thought we could have a brief discussion, but this won't be possible now. Put down your questions in the question box. We'll look at it later. Now, I want to just very quickly tell you about the 3 types of focus we have in any small research that we do. At least 3 types of focus. To use a kind of terminology, this is called triangulation, but don't worry about this word at all. Now, there is teacher's own perception of any phenomenon, like motivation. Now, what do I think is a problem with students' motivation? So that is teacher's perception. We call it TP. There are others' perceptions, for example, students' own perceptions, colleagues, parents, maybe principal, some others. So we call it OP. So it's like saying for everything there are 3-4 dimensions possible. Look at it from all angles. And then there is actual behavior. Teachers' behavior, students' behavior, etc. We call it B. So these 2, you can see, the perception part is one based on one's own views. These are more like reported data, what one feels. But this is actual behavior. You are going to look at actually what's happening. Suppose students say, I don't understand teacher's instructions. You will start looking at your own instructions. What did I say? How did I say? When did I give these instructions? So that is behavior. You will actually observe. We'll look at now these 3. I just want to give you an example of this 3 types of perceptions. 3 types of focus. Because we have to learn to develop research questions. Suppose we say students don't pay attention when I give instructions. How do we convert this? This is the first issue that we have got. How do I convert this into a research question of from 3 perspectives? Again, I would have liked you to answer this. I can't now. So I'm just going to show you how it is. So RQ, research question 1. What makes me think they don't pay attention? What makes me think they don't pay attention? This is teacher's perception. You can go and write a diary on this. You can put down all your feelings on all the past memories and so on. So you are actually giving a lot of value to your own thinking about it, because don't undermine your own perception, because even if students are the ones who have to listen to instructions, what do you think about it? Then what do students think about my instructions? You can ask them, you can interview them, you can give them a questionnaire, you can give them a question to answer in the class, whenever, so that will be the second research question. Third will be, what do I say when I give instructions? Actually, what do I do? How do you give instructions? So that means you have to observe the class. You can get somebody else to observe this behavior. You can, in fact, ask students to observe. Okay, so this is just one example. Very quickly, one more example. Students find it difficult to summarize ideas. Now, how do I develop this into 3 questions? How do I want students to summarize ideas? This is teacher's perception. What do students think about summarizing? How do I ask students to summarize? How do I actually ask students to summarize, which can be obtained through observation? Please note that this is not the only question that you will ask. You can ask. If there are 100 people in the audience today, now you can think of 100 different ways of asking questions about teacher perception, about others' perception, about behavior. I'm just giving you one example of this. But this needs a little practice and a little training. This session is only an introductory session if you have not done classroom research before. But then I'm sure many of you are very familiar with this. Now we are going to types of data gathering tools. You know, you are most familiar with all this. Teacher's own written reflections, that is writing a journal kind of thing, or you make notes. Even in your class, as you're teaching, you can start making notes when you give them some work. You can make it a habit to start noting down important points. Other people's written ideas on the topic. You can ask your colleague. You can ask some students. This is how you empower them, I would say. Empower is a very big word, but then give them responsibility. They will do a very good job, I want to tell you. Notes from informal conversations with colleagues, reflective writing by students, notes or recordings of focus group discussion. This is called normally SGD, where you get a small group of people answering the same question in a discussion mode. Notes or recordings of interviews, chats with individuals. You can record this interview and listen to it later. Responses to a questionnaire, lesson plans and materials. You can look at those. Lesson recordings. You can, with a phone these days, it's very easy to audio record your own class or video record your class. But do make it a point to take permission from your students because it's not ethical to do it without their knowledge. Notes made by a critical friend, a sympathetic observer, a colleague about your lesson. So this is very, very informative. It throws light on lots of things you probably didn't know you were doing. So it's very important to have that. But don't bring in a colleague who is very, very judgmental or who is nasty and who doesn't mean to help you. Maybe carries tales about your class to somebody else or to the principal. Don't bring such a person into your class. Pictures of your class you can take because they give very useful data about very important data. Students' performance on tasks, tests, assignments. This also is actual behavior. It could be recorded, it could be written. So these are all the a variety of tools. There could be many more, but we are just looking at a sample. I just want to show you some photographs where this teacher in Chennai is doing a kind of research project with her senior students, MPhil or I think master's students. This is a part of that research. Here is a group of college students where the teacher was doing, not this teacher, but another teacher was doing classroom research. She's taken some photographs. And here again, they are sitting. You can see their seating arrangement is being changed here. So they're all talking to each other. Here, I think groups of 3, they are discussing something on this paper. So taking photographs, in fact, give you quite a bit of clear evidence of what's going on. One bit about collaborative research. Working with a colleague who teaches the same class or another class at the same level is always very, very very satisfying, and you learn a lot when two of you put your heads together. You in fact will share a lot of common things, but yet different things. So that comes to the fore. How do we decide on the colleague we wish to work with? As I told you, think of a friend who is sympathetic, who also wants to grow with you, like you. So then that makes the best pair. The notion of a critical friend, this is what I've been hinting at all this while. A colleague, friend, when I said that person should not just be a friend who will say, come on, you have done everything very well, not be kind of a condescending or patronizing kind of person, but very critical. You could also have a mentor, a senior teacher, even sometimes a junior teacher can also be a mentor. One could be a mentor for the other. You both can mentor each other. The issue of relationships exists. I've mentioned this to you. Sometimes you think that you two can collaborate, but it doesn't work out. Then probably it's good to sort of part ways, not get into serious fights or serious misunderstanding, because collaboration is a very tricky kind of a thing. Here is another picture of the 2 teachers sitting and discussing their research. Here is a group of teachers sitting and here is a mentor. I don't think you can make out from here that He's the mentor. So you can see it's very non-hierarchical. It's not something like you wait for the mentor to tell you what to do, but then everyone is doing it together. Now, okay, very quickly, I'll take another 2-3 minutes. Important considerations, you need to plan your study according to your time and money and academic schedule and everything. Does it involve extra time? Be very, very realistic about it. Don't take on something you can't do. If you want to write up the study for dissemination, what considerations? Because we always want to talk about our study to somebody else when you have done research. And when you want to learn from others' experience, so you need to think about these things. You could also have a peer reviewer. Your critical friend could be your peer reviewer if you're writing up your study. Then some more important considerations. Now, things that are very, very crucial, you need to know about these things if you have to do research. Not a lot of it, not like a research methodology course maybe, but still. So something like, when should you do qualitative research and when quantitative? Should you combine? What is a mixed approach, method approach, and so on? There are ethical issues, permissions involved, how to do this. So that's also very crucial. Validity and reliability of tools is very important. If you're using a tool, a questionnaire which hardly gets you reliable data, what's the point then? So you need to learn about how to make it reliable. Then applicability of findings from the study in similar context is that in academic research, we talk a lot about generalizability, how your study can be applied or is generalizable to other contexts or a similar context. But then does it have for this? But all this we can't discuss today. But I just want to tell you that there are these things that you want to learn about. This will be for another day. That's it. Yeah, I have got in this references a very freshly released book, launched book by the British Council, Mentoring Teachers to Research Their Classrooms. This Richard Smith based it on all the work we have done on mentoring teacher research, especially as part of British Council projects. And there is also books like Champion Teachers, and this is again, all these are free to download. Teachers' Voices came out of a conference we had in Dhaka, Bangladesh, where many teachers carried out classroom research. This is another project that I was part of, where young learners also became researchers. Young learners, imagine, 8 to 14 years. So when I'm talking to college teachers, you can definitely involve them and make them very responsible participants in the research. Just want to tell you, there's a lot of research done by school teachers, but hardly any, I'm talking about classroom research, hardly any by college teachers. So I really hope that this session will at least get you to think about how you can also take up this research, which if you haven't done it already. And yeah, that will take you through a long way. Thank you very much for your listening.
Well, thank you so much, ma'am, for the informative session. Thank you. Thanks a great deal for sharing your information on the difference between the teacher research and the academic research. And also, you gave us some information on the benefits of teacher research and what do we do to adopt a research approach to teaching, and also the distinction between research study and research mindedness, and also the types of teacher research and also exploratory action research and action research and so on. Thanks a great deal for sharing the information with us, madam, and I hope all the participants certainly might have gained a lot of information through your lecture. And now I ask the moderator, Mr. Shiva, to take the questions, and I request you to answer the questions of a few participants. Thank you.
Good morning, madam. This is Siva.
Yeah.
Glad to see you again, second day continuously. Thanks a lot for an electrifying lecture in the very morning. I think we got some questions to trouble you in the morning. Uh, right, madam. I will come to the questions. There is a question from one of our participants who is asking, can you give some ideas about collaborative research and how to be cautious when people are doing collaborative research? What precautions one can take when they're collaborating with people in research?
Okay, yeah, collaborative research is while it's a very important one, and I think I strongly recommend that model as in 2 or 3 people doing it together. It can also be a bit tricky in the sense if the right kind of people don't get together, then there'll be issues. But then you can't preempt many of these things. I think a lot depends on how the dynamics, group dynamics works, and then what kind of people you have got. If you're like-minded people, it's most likely it will succeed. I don't think one should be very anxious about it right at the beginning. That may not be the approach to take. I think with an open mind, if you go into it, because everybody's intention is to sort of understand the teaching learning situation better, I think one will contribute. In fact, collaborative research has this fantastic advantage of different skill sets coming together. I'm good at something, but the other one is good at something else, and how do we put our heads together? So that's all I can say at this point.
It gets complemented with each person adding value.
That's right, exactly.
Thank you, madam. Right, I have one more question about this exploratory action research. And in that you opine that action is optional. I think participants would like to have a little elaboration on that. How? And how we can make it optional? Yes.
Make it optional. No, I begin by exploring a concern or an issue or a puzzle, whatever that's been bothering me, and then I look for evidence deliberately, systematically. It's more than just having some kind of a vague idea about it. So we go into it in a systematic way and collect evidence about that issue. We are still trying to understand the parameters or the different angles of that problem. So exploration is only about that. Once you have got some idea of what might be the issue and what you might want to do to solve or address the issue, then exploration stops and action begins. So for action research to happen, you should have explored. You should have gone through that exploratory stage.
A considerable length and depth of the exploration should be taken
Not
place.
Not so much length as depth. Yeah, you probe further and you get a deeper understanding of the problem from all angles. And then action itself suggests. Action is suggested by that exploration. And then you go and take that action.
Yes, exploration directs us to the action. That's what you are suggesting.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Thank you, madam. Then it takes me to another question from one of our participants. He's asking, how do we find an answer to a problem? Is there a method to arrive the answer?
I don't know what this person means. When you have got a lot of data from students, from some other teachers, and from your own diary, from your own self-reflection, whatever, when you combine them all, the solution strikes you in the face, almost. It becomes quite clear what the problem was and how this is being addressed. But then, as I showed you in that example spiral diagram, it can lead to more questions, more issues. So let's say group work, people felt that they were not participating, you set up group work activities. But then you realize that group work activities is resulting in a lot of noise. Only the bright ones or the smart ones are taking part, and the weaker ones are again dominating, weak ones are not taking. So that you'll need to address. Now, somebody I remember in a research study, they tried to make the weak ones group leaders, and that worked. That worked. But in another group, that did not work. So inside the same class, the solution could be of various kinds for different situations. So you are that much better off at the end of the study because you have got a much better understanding of the
understanding. Yes, the dynamics could have been revealed themselves when we try to do this kind of exploration. I guess. Madam, then this takes to me the question like there is one participant asking that if there are students who are not motivated, like they attend only for the sake of examinations,
Yeah.
how can a teacher motivate the student to do better?
The teacher won't know. That's why I'm saying find out from the students why they
Yes.
are not motivated. If they say, no, I only want exams, I only
Yes.
want to do exams, you can't do anything about that. If they think they can do the exam without attending the class or learning from there,
Yes.
then that means something is wrong with the system.
Yes, student. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So you need to that's why I said assumptions will have to be questioned here. We think that our class is going to help the student do better exams, but examine that assumption. Is
Yes.
it really helping coaching classes enough or guidebooks enough to do the
Yes.
exam well or
Yes,
something
sir.
else? So you
Yes.
need to, question that assumption.
I think the three-pronged idea you gave about teacher
Yeah,
perception and others'
yeah,
observation
yeah,
will help us here in this.
yeah, yeah.
I surely believe
Yes,
that
that's
that
right.
helps us.
Yeah,
I hope the participants try
yeah.
this.
Three is only an example. You can even
Yes.
go up to 4 and 5 and so on. In a
As
school, yeah,
yes, ma'am.
5 perceptions from 5 different people or data from 5 different sources.
Our perspectives,
Yeah,
how we look into it.
yeah,
Yes, thank you, madam, for that clarification. And we got a topical question over here. Two
yeah,
participants are asking it.
yeah.
How to make research relevant to today's changing world? And
Mm.
there is an add-on question from somebody. What is the scope for teacher research in the new normal situation?
The
What are the suitable methods of research in the light of COVID-19? I think we can take these
Okay.
two questions together.
Okay, together. Okay. I think that I want to really underline this, what I'm saying, that in this situation, teacher research is all the more important because
Right.
we really want to know whether students are learning through our webinars and through our online classes, whether they are listening to it. Somebody has to be a very good listener to listen to lectures like this without, not that
Yeah.
regular classes were much better, but then what I'm saying is there are new dimensions to this way of functioning. So you can research each aspect and you can involve them in that. And therefore, I would say this is really the need of the hour kind of thing. But
Yeah.
about how to do research on this, what is a relevant, what are relevant research studies? Again, as I said, the issues should emerge from the situation from your classroom.
Yes.
Yeah, from the online classroom, the situation will emerge if you are looking carefully. You'll need to look carefully. But if you're the kind who says, today I didn't go well, my class, my presentation, but tomorrow it will go very well. That's taking a very kind of a complacent attitude. So you
Yes.
need to not be complacent.
Yes, yes. I think every challenging situation will give a scope for a further research into a
That's right.
ISL classroom.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, madam. And I'm taking up a question from a fresher, probably.
Yeah.
What tips and suggestions would you give to someone who is a fresher? Maybe this is
Actually, all this thing, whatever presentation I had for today, sort of assumed that people can begin afresh. Yeah,
Yes.
It wasn't meant for because that's right. Then you would know everything. So I was actually presuming that many of you college teachers may not have done classroom research. I may be wrong. I hope I'm wrong.
But it's still it is still good for us to see from the basics of it to brush
That's
up.
right. Yeah.
Even the senior
Yeah.
faculty.
There are lots and lots of, even this book, the first book, Richard Smith's book that I mentioned, it's downloadable. It's all there. I don't have to do the webinar sitting here at all. Everything is available online.
No, we will try to get that and share with the participants also. I'll
Yeah.
ask my coordinators
Yeah.
for that help. Thank you for that support, madam. These are all the questions we have.
Okay. One thing I want to say before I end. I talked about teacher groups as one of the ways of keeping oneself motivated in the profession.
Yes, madam. Yes.
A teacher group in a college or even across colleges could be a very good starting point for doing research. If you float a question, if you float an idea that you want to do classroom research with several people, and then how shall we go about it? And I'm sure there'll be people, and that could be a very like-minded teacher research group.
maybe regionally faculty members come together and think about
That's also
establishing some informal groups for research.
Yeah.
Thank you, madam. Thank you for that idea.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to talk with you again the second day. Thanks a lot for all your clarifying answers elaborately. Have a good day, madam.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, madam. This is Jay Prakash, Assistant Professor of English. I have the pleasant task of proposing vote of thanks. Madam, your session has been really informative and engaging. The session on how do we keep learning and growing as teachers is really interesting. You started with accounts of 2 teachers and went on talking about how the teachers can get motivated. Also, the importance of reflections. The book that was recently launched into the market. We'll definitely read that book and get more information. Thank you, madam. Next, I also thank you for answering the questions posed by the participants. Thanks a lot, madam. And finally, there is a piece of information for the participants, that is the link for the feedback for all the sessions will be posted on question and answers box. You'll have to click on the link and give your feedback. Thank you. That will be posted tomorrow. Thank you.